Yang berhormat Datuk Dr. Haji Badrul Hisham Kasim, Chief Executive Officer Johor Civil Service. Yang berbahagia Datuk Syed Muhammad Syed Ibrahim, President and Chief Executive of Johor Corporation. Mr. Tyler Lim, Director Transformation and Strategic Project Gulf Insider. Yang berbahagia Datuk Omar Siddiq, Chief Executive Officer HSBC Malaysia. Mr. Ng Kuan Kai, Consul General of Singapore in Johor Bahru. Yang berbahagia Profesor Dr. Ong Kiang Ming, Member of the Cerebral Council. Yang berbahagia Encik Najminuddin, Chief Talent Officer Johor Corporation. Representative from the state and federal. Senior leadership from Johor Corporation and investing companies. Datuk-datuk, panelists, moderator, partners, stakeholders, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum and good morning everyone. Welcome to Johor Conversation 2025 Series 1. Datuk-datuk, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Fadila and it's my pleasure to extend the warmest welcome to each and every one of you to Johor Conversation 2025 Series 1, a forum organized by Gulf Insider in partnership with Cerebrum by Jacob and the Johor Civil Service Academy as our knowledge partner. And before we embark on this journey, I would like to invite Imam Muhammad Zaini bin Yasnun from Waqaf An-Nur for Doa recitation.
صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Alhamdulillah, all praise we give to you Allah for all the blessings bestowed upon to us. Gratitude is expressed to you in every opportunity and occasion given. We are given chance to be together in your conversation, and we beg and pray to you, Allah, this conference give us useful input to pin and remember. Ya Allah, on the auspicious morning, we express our gratitude to you for allowing us to attend this conference series. Today, we are grateful to be given the opportunity to be together with members of the conference. We seek your blessing for the smooth progress of this event from the beginning till the end. Ya Allah, bless Johor Corporation alongside with Gulf Insider, initiated the Johor Conversation with the intention of propelling Johor economic growth with innovative and resilient foundation, as related by technology supported by our knowledge partner, JCS Academy. Ya Allah, the most merciful, we ask for guidance every plan and decision reached, so that we always be under the shade of protection, safety and find inner contentment for the trust given to us. Show us the way out of difficulties, ease and revealing problem, and be blessed with success in the end of the road, not only the world, but actually success in the hereafter. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Supply chains and economic strategy in a fragmented global landscape and brings together policymakers, civil servants, and industry leaders to reimagine Johor's economic role in a world of shifting alliances and global uncertainties. And to kick things off, it's my pleasure to invite Yang Berhormat Datuk Dr. Haji Badrul Hisham bin Qasim, Chief Executive Officer Johor Civil Service Academy, to deliver the welcome remarks. Please welcome.
Muhammad Said Ibrahim, President and Chief Executive, Johor Corporation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome each and every one of you this morning to Johor Conversation 2025, jointly organized by CELBRIM, by Johor Corporation, Gulf Insider, and for the first time, Johor Civil Service Academy being part of this program. I would like to thank CELBRIM and Johor Corporation for inviting us. It is a great pleasure to be part of this. Some of us have been to previous Johor Conversation, but as a co-partner, this is our first time here. So thank you very much. With the theme of globalization versus deglobalization, navigating Johor's role in a fragmented world, today's discussion will explore how we as a state can respond strategically to uncertainties of global trade, shifting alliances, if I can call it that, and evolving economic priorities. We've just been seeing the latest on the tariffs, so maybe today is the right platform for us to discuss that. I'm not too sure. For Johor Civil Service Academy, our mission is to develop forward-thinking, adaptive, and high-performing civil servants. And a platform like this will help us to understand the business side, the economy, and to have the strategic partnership with everyone here. And however, there's a caveat for us. Yesterday, our new State Secretary was sworn in, and there's a lot of things happening in Kota Iskandar this morning. So we only have a handful of the Johor Civil Service officers today, but I'm sure that is representative of the JCS officers, and hopefully we can thank you very much for those attending today, and I appreciate your time here, and hopefully for future collaborations we can have more and more Johor Civil Service officers here. So once again, on behalf of the JCS Academy, I extend our deepest appreciation to all speakers, partners, and participants in today's session. And thank you very much for inviting us to be a partner in today's Johor Conversation and future Johor Conversations. Thank you very much.
Officer Johor Civil Service Academy. Yang berbahagia Datuk Syed Muhammad Said Ibrahim, President and Chief Executive of Johor Corporation, Mr. Tyler Lim from Gulf Insider, Yang berbahagia Datuk Omar Siddiq, Chief Executive Officer for HSBC Malaysia, Mr. Ng Kuan Kwai, our friend from the Consul General of Singapore, Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Ong Kiam Ming, member of Cerebrum Council, and ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Johor is on the cusp of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform itself. I think the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone represents a unique opportunity, the only one in the world, where two nation-states collaborate and work together to develop an economic zone. The combination of external global trade wars, internal alignment from federal and state, and also the strong leadership that we've seen in the last few years have resulted in Johor being one of the top growing economies in Malaysia. In fact, for 2024, Johor is the highest in terms of GDP growth with 6.4%, and that's above the national average of 5.1%. In the Q1 for this year, foreign direct investment into Johor is around 27 billion, and I think we are about to surpass last year's number quite easily by the end of 2025. But the growth that we've seen is also felt on the ground. You see the constructions happening all over the place. I think people from outside of Johor coming in, especially if they have not been here for the last 2-3 years, can see rapid transformation around, especially in the CBD area. We've also seen a lot of events happening, right? I think Johorians, and especially those in the corporate Johor, would notice that there's a lot of activities and events happening. In fact, near us today at DoubleTree, there's an Interconnect World Forum happening to discuss about the digital economy in Johor, which is very unique. Usually, you know, Johor is not known for its digital economy, but the Interconnect World Forum is there. So a lot of things are happening in Johor. But the growth that we've seen is not without its challenges, right? I think you would notice businesses are struggling with the battle for talent across the board. You see infrastructure gridlock in certain areas. And for the rakyat, you know, rising cost of living is a perennial issue. You know, affordable housing is another big issue that is at the heart of what the Yang Amat Berhormat Menteri Besar is trying to resolve. But this is where, as a state economic development corporation, you know, JCOP feels it is our duty and responsibility to not only participate in the economic activity of the state, but also to help find solutions to the challenges that it faces. And this is where a platform such as Cerebrum comes into the picture. Cerebrum is Johor Corporation's think and do tank, and it is created to become an impact network where we connect different stakeholders from the state, from the federal, from the rakyat, from the corporations, to come together and sit and discuss issues that is important to them. And so Johor Conversations is part of that. This is actually the 6th Johor Conversations that we've had. We've covered so many different types of topics from JSSZ, and today we're talking about globalization, supply chain. But we aim to do more than just being a platform where you come and listen to a conversation and discuss issues. Hopefully, and inshallah, with a new direction that we've embarked on this year, we want to create more of a lasting impact. And that comes into things like white papers following up from discussions, and inshallah, in the near future, workshops where we connect people from the government, public and private sector to come together and find solutions. Which is why I'm very, very happy to see that we have now embarked on a collaboration with JCS Academy, and it is also a unique collaboration in the sense that I think even for JCS, this is the first of its kind, where they work together not just with a local private partner, but also with Gulf Insider. So this is a truly unique arrangement, and we believe that it is important to include the Johor Civil Service into the picture, because a lot of the issues and challenges that are being faced by businesses, corporations, and individuals and the rakyat needs to be solved together with a whole of government approach. So thank you so much, Datuk Badrul, for lending support to this initiative. And I'm also happy to see, you know, a diverse panelists of guests here today from Datuk Omar from HSBC Malaysia, and a unique opportunity today where we have a former Deputy Minister of International Trade sitting with the current officer of the Ministry of International Trade in Singapore. So this is the kind of collaboration that we hope to see more of in the future. Before I end, I just want the audience to take away from the opportunity that we have today to network with each other, get to know the different stakeholders that we have in the state of Johor, and inshallah, you know, live today with the desire to create a lasting impact not just for your organization, but also for the state of Johor and insyaAllah for Malaysia. With that, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Anyway, Yang Berhormat Dr. Haji Badrul Hisham Qasim, CEO JCSA. Yang berbahagia Datuk Syed Muhammad Syed Ibrahim, President and Chief Executive Johor Corporation. Yang berbahagia Datuk Omar Siddiq, CEO HSBC Malaysia. Mr. Ng Kwan Kai, Consul General of Singapore in Johor Bahru, my friend who I have not met in 15 years. Yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Ong Ken Meng, Member of the Cerebrum Council, Yang berbahagia Encik Nashmi Norton, Chief Talent Officer of Johor Corporation. Friends, welcome to the Johor Conversations 2025. I want to thank you for being here with us today, and I also want to thank you for being here with us through this journey as we enter into the third year of the Johor Conversations here at Cerebrum, which had somewhat become my Johor office because I'm here ever so often for the Johor Conversations. So thank you, Nashmi. I also want to thank the Johor Civil Service Academy for coming on board, the Johor Conversations as a knowledge partner for the first time. Now, we started in January 2023 with the team From Ideas to Impact. Since then, in the subsequent 4 runs, we spoke about sustainability, resilience, inclusivity, citizen-centricity, innovation, and technology. All the building blocks to achieve the vision of a successful and economically vibrant Johor as laid out in Maju Johor 2030. The journey to get there is not linear, and definitely not without its challenges. COVID-19 upended livelihoods, but reshaped the way we work and in some ways turbocharged our technology adoption. The post-COVID recovery saw supply chains disrupted, inflation skyrocketing, but opportunities abound in the digital economy. Then came the terrorists of Liberation Day just 3 months ago, with the 90-day pause running out on the 9th of July, tomorrow, or for us, the day after, if you take into account the time zone differences. Countries in Southeast Asia were hard hit with terrorists ranging from 10 to 49%. Amongst an audience of business people, bankers, an ex-minister, and I'm referring here to Dr. Syed Muhammad, Dr. Omar, Prof. Dr. Ong, I will not attempt to explain tariffs or its impact and embarrass myself. But if you wish to know more, you can put them aside later and ask. Well, if you had read the news this morning, some countries would have received Trump's letters. Some have negotiated their tariffs down. Some made no headway. Some, the tariffs went up. Malaysia, for example, up 1%. Well, it's unclear where the rest of the countries and their tariffs will go, but it appears that some have also negotiated their way up to 70%. In fact, this portion of my remarks have resulted in a version change with every single remark President Trump has made. So, here's the caveat, right? If anything that I've said is not accurate, now remember, they were factual sometime in the past. Now, a lot is unclear, but what is clear is that the global economy and trade order has changed. So against this backdrop, today's Johor Conversations theme is particularly apt: globalization versus deglobalization. We will discuss and hear from the various experts and thinkers on navigating Johor into this fragmented world and seizing the opportunities. We will address supply chain challenges, cross-border access, trade and investment outlooks, as well as infrastructure development approaches in the 4 sessions to follow. And now is the time where we walk the talk. moving from ideas into taking action so that there is real impact arising from the Johor conversations. And to this end, we are introducing a new capital, as well as the smart city and tech parks. Now, there are already many different work streams and initiatives happening on all of these fronts, some even stretching across the COPs. Johor Development Talent Council, JDTC, Johor Skills, Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center, Johor IMFCJ, Ibrahim Technopolis, the Johor Smart City 2030 Blueprint. I can go on and on. Now, the intent of this COP is not to create more work for anyone, and definitely not to duplicate the work already done. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It will allow for a common platform to bring in more stakeholders on board, stakeholders who sit outside the existing work streams, with opportunities to share, seek areas of collaboration, and most importantly, greater efficiency by reducing the duplication of work. All of this is only possible if we agree to come. Now, beyond the Johor conversations, beyond the COPs, that's not obviously all that Gulf Insider has to offer. So, advertisement time. I'll share 2 upcoming events that we're doing. Well, first, another conversation. We did not charge Might for the copyrights, but we are their supporting partner for. With the theme of achieving ASEAN Sustainable Competitiveness Beyond 2025, the Cyberjaya conversations will explore how collaborative R&D across border knowledge sharing and policy harmonization can position ASEAN as a hub for scientific leadership. So 3rd December, KLCC, sign up on the QR code on the screen and see you there. Well, the second is Gulf Insider's own flagship event, and we are partnering Kementerian Digital and the National AI Office, or more affectionately known as My AI Day. We will discuss how government agencies and state-linked companies are harnessing innovation to better serve the rakyat, especially through the use and deployment of AI. Well, enough of advertisements for now, and into our sessions proper.
Fragmented global economy, supply chain strategy is being redefined. Johor has the opportunity to strengthen its position as a manufacturing and logistic hub in Southeast Asia. And this panel will explore nearshoring versus offshoring, shift in critical industries, and the promise of the JSSEZ. And before I invite our moderator, just a quick note, we will be using Slido to collect your questions throughout the day.
And I think from the speeches earlier, to just watch your back. So for decades, global trade priced efficiency above all. Resilience, diversification, political alignment are the new rules in the game. As of this morning, US has imposed 25% tariffs on selected Malaysian goods reportedly in sectors like electronics and renewables. This has put Malaysia in a new trade spotlight, Dr. and Professor and Mr. Andrew, not just as a manufacturing hub, but as a strategic player caught in the shifting tides of global alignment. So the game is changing. Friendshoring, dual sourcing, digital twins, resource nationalism, these aren't abstract anymore, but boardroom and cabinet level conversations. But amid this turbulence, Johor stands as a pivotal edge with SEZ, its connectivity and its potential anchor for a smarter, more resilient Asian supply chain. So I would like to introduce the panel. No stranger to the sessions, Professor Dr. On Kiang Ming, former Deputy Minister of MITI, a member of the Cerebral Council, widely known for his thoughtful takes of Malaysia's industrial future in sessions like this or through his social media and podcasts. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
And from across the causeway, like literally this morning, we've joined by Mr. Andrew Cheong, Deputy Director of Singapore's Ministry of Trade Industry, someone who's been at the heart of the economic strategy. To guide our conversation panels today, we will flow with a broad opening question to both of you to set the stage. Then we'll dive deeper, first with Professor on Malaysia's strategic positioning, followed by Andrew, insights on regional dynamics. If time permits, we will open up for a few questions from the floor. Panelists, ready? Okay. So, opening questions to both of you. With the US reviving hardline tariffs, this time on Malaysia, Japan, and South Korea, and trends like friendshoring, dual sourcing, digital twins, and resource nationalism taking hold, what do you see trends that stood out most to both of you?
Maybe I can start first. Thanks so much, Arif. Thanks to Jacob and Cerebrum for inviting me to share thoughts, I think, on a very important topic. Before I answer the question, just a clarification point. When I woke up to the news about what President Trump had done in terms of sending letters to the leaders of 12 selected countries, I think we still have some room. The proposed tariffs of 25%, that has been suggested or proposed by President Trump will not kick in until the 1st of August. And I think this is very clearly a bargaining strategy that President Trump is playing. I think this basically puts more pressure on the countries involved that, they have to put more on the table to the extent that perhaps even contemplating what Vietnam did, which is to offer zero tariffs to all US imports into Vietnam. I'm not sure whether Malaysia is ready to make that move, but it's probably something that has got to be considered on the policymaker side. So I don't think we should overreact to it. I think there's still time to negotiate, put a deal on the table since President Trump is a deal maker, and be in a position where Malaysia will not be hit even as hard as Vietnam. So that's just for context. To answer your question, Arif, I think the premise of using the term friendshoring is probably outdated. Because when we talked about friendshoring, this was in a context where we were still talking about China plus one, where the US had firm allies and also non-allies or countries that they were not so close to. In this context, I've used this term in other settings. I used it half in jest, but it's no longer friendshoring and China plus one, but it is US minus. What I mean by US minus is, of course, they are the largest market in the world. We cannot ignore the US. But what I think we see increasingly happening is countries taking one approach towards negotiating with the US, and then countries taking another approach in terms of diversification and also negotiating and expanding their supply chains and their FTA agreements with other countries and other regions. And I think on this part, Malaysia is doing the right thing in terms of engaging with entities such as BRICS, GCC, China, and so on, and India, and so on and so forth. So that, I think, is part and parcel of the diversification strategy that's taking place now. In terms of trying to nail down friendshoring in a more substantive way, I would say that there's no better example than friendshoring between Malaysia and Singapore. Right, and Nachmi rightly pointed out the statistics that was released by the Department of Statistics Malaysia earlier this month, if I'm not mistaken, showing that the Johor GDP by state has actually increased by the most over the past 8 years, from 2016 to 2024, by 6.4%, even higher than Selangor at 6.3, KL at 6.2. And I think this is partly driven by investment, including, of course, data centers. An additional example of this benefit in friendshoring, I think, is the increase in investments in the manufacturing sector, not just from Singapore, but also from investments from other parts of the world, including China, Europe, and the US. And we see that in the increase in the manufacturing GDP by about 11.5% for Johor from 2023 to 2024, which is even higher than Penang, of 5.5% from 2023 to 2024, because we've seen a lot of manufacturing growth in Penang. So I think that is a good trend moving forward, and this is part and parcel of the GSSEZ story that we have to sell even more, right? So that's friendshoring. That's sort of like the question on this, multi-location, dual location, which I think Malaysia and Singapore is taking the right direction towards. The last question that you asked about digital twin is a little bit more technical question. But basically, digital twins, for those of you who may not be aware, are manufacturing ecosystems where you have a digital version that's on the system. These days, you can put it on the cloud, you can put it on-prem, and then you can do things on the digital twin to simulate what will happen if, let's say, you make these changes in the real physical world. And I think even though there has not been really substantive use cases in the Malaysian context that we are aware of, I think this will become increasingly important in 3 areas. One would be in the area of predictive maintenance, because with a lot more IoT devices and things of that nature, you can actually run simulations so that you can see when your machines need to do predictive maintenance. Many companies are already doing that. The other area would be in the area of energy efficiency. I think with the increase in the electricity tariffs, especially for the medium and high voltage players in Malaysia, including data centers, this would be something that is more important. And then the last area would be in the area of process optimization, meaning there may be certain processes that you want to enhance, even these days using artificial intelligence to simulate if you change your production process in one area, how would it affect others? And because of greater digitalization from a data collection standpoint with IoT devices, I think there will be a lot more kind of simulations that you can do on the digital twin that can be applied to the physical world. Of course, the challenge would be, can companies, including those in the GSSEZ ecosystem, produce these kinds of showcases to show that this is happening within the Johor ecosystem and grow confidence that this is indeed a middle to higher manufacturing ecosystem that we need to develop further. Yeah. Thanks.
Andrew?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me. I'll talk about the GSSEZ a bit later, but I thought maybe I wanted to focus a bit on what this means for businesses and how ASEAN can play a role. I mean, obviously, we're all very enamored, right, and very concerned about the immediate effects of the tariffs. But I think in the longer term, test. Okay, I think it's better. So I think in the longer term, companies will also be looking to where they can make some of these long-term investments, especially in a time where there's more protectionism, in a time where the US turns inward. So I think there's one, right? And I think that's where ASEAN can really, and Southeast Asia can really play a role. We now have a combined GDP of 38 trillion US dollars in 2023, and we'll be the largest, probably the largest, one of the 4th largest economy in the world by 2030. And our demography is also in our favor, right? We have 670 plus million people, with more than 60% who are below 35. So ASEAN as a whole and as a value proposition really will be very attractive to companies. But I think that said, we cannot take it for granted that we will be the next economic growth hub, right, or the next source. So I think there are 3 factors that we will have to think about and think very carefully about if we want to be able to attract businesses to come. The first, I think, is in terms of cross-border cooperation, right? So companies will be looking at investing in individual countries, individual Southeast Asian countries, but they also want to tap on the strengths of different countries, and they want to be able to build up the supply chains across the borders. So of course, the JSS Act is one example, right? And many aspects of cooperation between countries in Southeast Asia, and within as ASEAN as a platform, there's also been increasing collaboration and ever progressing economic integration. Right? So that's one area that I think will be very important, especially when we look at this idea of friendshoring, right? How do you make use of the strengths of different countries to be able to build up your business? And if you want to move your factories, you want to move your operations over, I think that's one consideration. The second is that this has to be backed up by connectivity, right? And of course, physical connectivity is important. The ability to move goods, people across borders, to be able to shift your supply chains and shift production between different countries is very important. And also the ability to, for your less tangible aspects in your digital, financial, as well as your energy. Right, so these are all things that I think will be a backbone for cooperation and a backbone for companies to build up the supply chains in Southeast Asia. I think the third one, I thought very long about what is another C that I can use. And I think one thing that companies will look out for is regulatory certainty, right? Not that it has to be stagnant, but it has to be stable, and there has to be a rhyme and a reason for changes to take place. And I think this is particularly important in a time where the man in Washington changes his mind every other day, right? And that is where companies will look at where they can make long-term investments and where they can make decisions where they know that they can make money in the next 7 to 10 years or 15 years. So I think these are all things that we will probably, as a region, need to build up. And if you want to tap on this idea of friendshoring, be it with China plus one, or be it with other companies that want to find somewhere more stable, ASEAN and Southeast Asia can be a safe haven for these investments.
All right, I think we are talking the same language. So we're opening for Professor. The first question for you is on the increasing talk of non-aligned supply chain blocks, especially when it comes to trade corridors not pinned to either the US or China anymore. Could Malaysia take on this meaningful role here? And what does it take to be seen as a neutral strategic hub? What's the secret sauce to be that?
Sorry, if when you talk have to make with regards to geopolitics. And I think that those kinds of shifts are already happening and have been happening since 2018, probably since 2016 when Trump 1.0 happened, and then you had the China plus one, pressures to diversify the supply chains, either on the part of Chinese as well as, and also on the part of non-Chinese companies. And we see that happening in Malaysia, and I want to point out one particular ecosystem, which is the EV components ecosystem. Right? I'm not talking about manufacturing or assembly of EVs yet, although Geely has expressed that they will do so through Proton. I'm talking about components in terms of lithium-ion batteries, batteries for EV batteries for two-wheelers. We see investments from Chinese as well as non-Chinese companies happening in Penang, even in Johor, and I think that's a good development. That we are able to tap into that supply chain that is growing very fast. And at this point in time, we don't see the US focusing on this particular area at this point in time. They are much more focused on the semiconductor ecosystem, which we can talk about later. So I think that kind of supply chain diversification is already benefiting Malaysia and also other parts of Southeast Asia. What I want to emphasize here is maybe picking up what Andrew said earlier are two things. The first round of these kinds of investments, right, would usually be sort of like standalone investments where, for example, companies coming from China, from Europe, they are still dependent perhaps on some of the supply chains in their home country, especially for Chinese companies. I think for Malaysian policymakers, the challenge would be what kind of incentives do you want to put on the table so that increasingly these supply chains are part and parcel of the domestic as well as the ASEAN supply chain. And I think this is good long term because if, let's say, some of these increasing pressures on non-alignment comes and affects the EV sector, either from Europe or from the US, at least there is the option of pivoting or relying on local as well as regional supply chains in ASEAN. And I think as the ASEAN market becomes more important, even for areas like EVs, this would be a very good case study to again take note of and definitely one that will benefit the region. Maybe one last point. I think Singapore has always been very open to FDIs coming into ASEAN. And of course, one of the reasons is that there will be positive spillover effects going to Singapore. Whether it's in the form of logistics, in terms of connectivity through the ports and the airport in Singapore, but also importantly, financial services. Because once these companies set up their manufacturing facilities in Southeast Asia, they will have a finance center doing trading activities out of Singapore for tax optimization purposes. So I think all this benefits the Southeast Asian ecosystem in ways that we should highlight more and also to capture more of that positive activity.
Okay, Professor, I think zooming into still in the Malaysian landscape where Johor is one of the biggest E&E player in sector, where E&E has always been a stronghold for the Johor state. But can we move up the supply chain into a vertical integration or IP-led value creation? At the moment, what do you think is the missing piece?
Okay, I think in terms of mid-tier manufacturing, Johor does have an important role to play in the semiconductor ecosystem, but I would say it still plays third fiddle to Penang and also to Selangor. And I think one of the main reasons is because of the lack of skills and also lack of policy initiatives. So one example that I'd like to point to is the very aggressive push by the Selangor state government through CDEC to push for a IC design hub. And there have been a lot of activities done. I've been sort of like adjacently involved in some of the activities through one of the semiconductor training academies that CDEC has set up. And they've brought in a lot of players into the ecosystem. It's a big bet, but one that I think can take advantage of the capabilities that are in Selangor already. And you can see, Phison, the founder of Phison, putting money there. You can see people who are part of the investment ecosystem through Skychip Ventures putting money and people there as well. So you can see the ecosystem growing. The ARM investment that Malaysia has put in can also be deployed through some of the companies that want to have access to the design ecosystem that ARM provides, of course, provided by the Malaysian government. So those are things which I think are still lacking in the Johor ecosystem and may not. I would say it's may be better to try to focus on what the Johor Talent Development Council is doing to enhance talent development in other areas first, instead of trying to jump straight towards developing talent on the semiconductor side, or let's say in areas such as IC design. Yeah.
All right. I think from the talent point of view, I think that is always something that Johor would like to address through, I think it's spearheaded by Encik Najmi as well. Moving on to Mr. Andrew, in the perspective of Singapore, how do you see the evolution of regional collaboration, especially when in Johor, when it comes to nearshoring and diversification in supply chains?
Thanks very much. So I think going on this theme of cooperation, we would need to find new and innovative ways to be able to connect our countries, right, and connect the different different countries and member states of ASEAN to try to ride on this opportunity, right, that the tariffs bring in some ways. And the GSSEZ is one example, the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone, right? And it's a way for us to build up connectivity, right, between Singapore and Johor and with the rest of Malaysia, and really to tap on the strengths of both across the causeway, and to allow companies to see us as one single investment destination, right, and not two individual locations. And I think this is where we want to build up the connectivity between both countries. We also want to build up the integration and the ability for companies to be able to operate seamlessly between both Singapore and Johor. And that's where, Prof mentioned, how we can build up links. One of the things that we started off with when we were designing the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone was this idea of twinning, right? The ability for companies to site operations both in Singapore and Johor, and to be able to build up their operations. They could set up headquarters in Johor or in Singapore, set up factories, tap on R&D. And so then you can really make use of different aspects of Singapore and Johor to be able to build up and this, I think, will allow us to be a more attractive destination for companies, and it allows Singapore and Malaysian companies to expand their operations. So I would say, of course, I mean, Penang and Selangor have been quite advanced, right, in some ways. Also, the ingredients are there, I think, in Johor for more things to happen, and for exciting things to happen in this region.
Okay, maybe we have talked about the special economic zone pretty much a lot. How do you see the Johor, Singapore, Malacca Green Trade Triangle has become, for it to become a more sustainable model for future regional logistics?
I'm not familiar with these discussions. I think that it's really not about drawing the lines, right, between the states. And I don't think you in Malaysia see that way as well. I think it's really about how can we present a compelling story to the outside world, right? As between Singapore and Malaysia, and also as Southeast Asia as a bloc, right? And how can we tell people that there are opportunities in this region, and you should, and that there's stability, and that the governments are interested and committed to attracting investments here.
Maybe can I just add on that? I think there's been a lot of hype about the GSSEZ. I think the natural flow of investments is such that a lot of this would probably have happened without the GSSEZ, but with the GSSEZ, there may be certain catalytic effects, including perhaps after the RTS is operational, we can see the construction site out there. But I think it would increase a lot of confidence, both on the Singapore as well as the international market side on the GSSEZ, if there were one or two iconic projects that can be facilitated by the governments of Malaysia and Singapore, perhaps with the inclusion of some of the one or two of the Johor state entities, including JCOP perhaps. And I'll give one example. Singapore, was very fast in terms of moving into Vietnam in the 1990s, developing the Singapore-Vietnam Industrial Park ecosystem. That was done under Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong's time. And now, you can see the kind of industrial park development in Vietnam is booming. It would be fantastic if, let's say, there could be a Singapore-Malaysia or Malaysia-Singapore industrial park that's developed by GLCs on both sides of the border in Johor itself as a starting point. And if, let's say, this could be an industrial park that is green, that's sustainable, you can put data centers inside, you can put high-tech manufacturing inside, not just for Malaysian and Singapore companies, but for international companies as well, supported by certain tax incentives. That will also signal the fact that this is something that both governments are committed towards.
It could be some investments coming from the Gear Up ecosystem that the second finance minister has proposed, which is led by 6 GLICs. And if, let's say, you could even think further and think more ambitiously, for something like this Singapore-Malaysia or Malaysia-Singapore Industrial Park, could we have an evolution whereby it becomes something like a Kulim Industrial Park ecosystem, right? Whereby you can have local autonomy, where you can have fast tracking of building permits, and everything is sort of like issued within the purview of the industrial park, where you actually have the ability, to get federal, approval and state approval, to in some ways bypass it, to even generate to issue licenses for your own electricity generation, right? And then maybe further down the road, this park can evolve into something like a free zone, whereby you can maybe even benefit from the FTAs that Singapore is currently enjoying, with all the different FTA partners. It's an evolution which requires trust on both sides of the border, and also investments on both sides of the border. And if, let's say, you can develop something iconic like that, it would be a long-term play that countries can really point towards. Just like how for example, when we think about China and Singapore, they will think about the Suzhou Industrial Park that has developed over a long period of time, right? As opposed to, let's say, the China-Malaysia Qingzhou Industrial Park, there's much less activity and much less sort of like attention on that particular development.
Okay, so I think previously when we were here, Professor, I think we talked about the narratives, right? I think, Andrew, you mentioned about the narratives on the GSSEZ. On that point, right, since the last time that we are here, it's pretty much hyped up, and there's a lot that is happening. I think previously we talked about how it should be not just about narratives, it also needs to be executed through projects that is ongoing. So in terms of the region's openness to ensure the resilience in supply chain, how do you think that we can continue to ensure that the conversation about JCZ is continued to be positive in this area of supply chains?
I think I would say that that we are, in a way, we are still early days, right, for the JSEZ. We just signed an agreement earlier this year. I would say we are trying to put together a lot of the building blocks. So we want to increase connectivity. We also want to see how we can improve or build on the business ecosystem to make it easier for investments to take place. I think what these things will need to go on, right? Talent, all these things will take time to develop. So I wouldn't say that and it will take me, so that will take some time, and it will not be, it will not happen overnight. I think what we need also is, besides having projects, is to have real test cases and to have real success cases, right? And we already have companies that have come in even before the agreement was signed. These will, I think, build confidence and show the rest of the world that things can be done, right? Business can go. And it also gives the Johor system and the federal system time, and the Singapore system the practice, right? How do you work through the processes? And I mean, for example, we have companies like Paris Baguette, right? They have come here. They have headquarters in Singapore. They have a regional manufacturing hub here. I also attended last year the groundbreaking of AgroCorp's protein factory, right, in Johor. So these are all ways to demonstrate, right, that you can make money, and that you are, and over time you build up the ecosystem. So I would say that for me, it's more about ground up, right? How do you build up that confidence over time, and then slowly crowd in business opportunities from around the world.
Yeah, so when you talk about supply chain resilience, right, the resilience is tested during times of crisis, whether it is from some of these geopolitical challenges, or whether it is from other emergency matters such as what happened during COVID. And I think the building up of this resilience is inextricably linked towards policy stability and trust. And I want to highlight one of the things that really disrupted, let's say, trust on probably the Singapore side with regards to food security is when during COVID, there was the sudden decision to ban the export of live chickens and also eggs to Singapore. And that produced, I think, a reaction that still has consequences to this day. Some that are bad for the Malaysian ecosystem from the part of the suppliers. Some are maybe good in terms of working together with, let's say, FarmBite to try to, increase these kinds of alternative supply chains on the food side. But without that kind of trust, your resilience breaks down whenever there are emergencies. And I'm glad that under this government, both the state and the federal governments, there's much more open and close communications with Singapore. And that's something to be highlighted and to appreciate. But I think talk is one thing. It's an important starting point. It's in the deliverables in terms of actual projects and actual milestones, including, for example, 50 important GSSCZ projects in 5 years. That's part and parcel of the agreement. I think those are the things that the private sector will look for to see whether or not both governments are committed in terms of trying to preserve and expand this supply chain resilience.
Okay, I think I have been given an iPad, so there's a few questions that from the floor. You've mentioned about Vietnam and how they have positioned themselves to be an ally so that investment will actually be coming into them from the US. So the question is that, will there be a flight of US companies to Vietnam if US feels that we are indecisive in supporting the US? And how does Malaysia actually position itself to ensure that there's continuous investment into Malaysia?
I think there's already been a lot of investments from different countries in Vietnam over the past 5 years. There was a lead story on The Economist, I think maybe last month, talking about the opportunities and challenges of investing in Vietnam. Yes, FDI is going in and has gone in, but it has led to an increase in the wages, especially since the rural labor force in Vietnam many of them have already moved to the urban areas. There's also, I think, a lack of integration with the local SMEs in Vietnam, and that's quite different from the Malaysian ecosystem where our SMEs are pretty much plugged in to the semiconductor ecosystem, for example. So even though I think Vietnam is up and rising, I think we still have certain capabilities, especially in the mid-tier section of the manufacturing ecosystem, that we can and should take advantage of. And I don't think it's true to say that Vietnam is firmly in the camp of the US. They've always played a balancing role between China and US, and they will continue to do so. For example, even as they talked about lowering US tariffs to 0%, the new Secretary General of the Communist Party in Vietnam still was engaging China very, very closely, and they will continue to play the balancing act.
Okay, I think this is another question that I can ask Andrew from the floor. From your point of view, coming from the Ministry of Trade, how do you see the media relations be used to build stronger community trust by showcasing local supply chain investment?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe local media relations, right? Yeah, so definitely we will need to share more, right? And I think our experience is that for many Singaporeans, the impression of the Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone is that it's about coming here to shop, right? Come to Komta, go to City Square to buy stuff. But I think we do need to share what the benefits are, not just for consumers, but also for economy. And that's where we have to come and share company success stories, right? I mentioned AgroCorp, I mentioned Paris Bouquet, maybe Archisen, right, who was also recently had a launch here. So these are all things that, but I think the challenge that we always have is how do you translate that to benefits for individuals, right? And that's really about how do you make those things tangible, right? How do you share the benefits it brings to jobs, both for Singapore and for Malaysia, the benefits to our economy as a whole, and what those spillovers are. So I think those are the very intangible aspects that sometimes makes it a bit hard to communicate. And that's why Prof also mentioned, right, the idea of having iconic projects. I just wanted to say quickly, I guess that also comes in a time of, if we are into a different context, right? You know, in Vietnam, even in Indonesia, decades ago, in a way, Singapore was able to lean in because of the state of the development of those countries at the time. I think in Malaysia and Johor, in a way, things are actually very developed, right? And the private sector has already come in. So I think we have to figure out, you know, what are the ways that we can complement one another and really be able to bring out the strengths of both sides.
I just want to add on to this, and Najmi and Dato knows that I've shared this in the last Equilibrium Council meeting. I think when you talk about media coverage, right, these days it's not just about the mainstream media. And I think one of the things that probably can be built up better in terms of the ecosystem in Johor, including perhaps working with Gov Insider, would be to build up the social media ecosystem to show Johor in a different light. Work, live, play here, and to change the narrative that used to be, you know, when I was studying in Singapore in the 1990s, that Johor is a very unsafe place, right? Some people still refer to that kind of narrative, and I think that has changed quite a bit, and that needs to be accentuated in JB. You know, meaning, you know, there's a lot of interesting gated and guarded places that, you know, you would feel very safe to go to. I read a story about how people in Singapore are coming to Malaysia so that they can buy cars and have the experience of driving cars around, nice cars that they maybe be able to afford in Singapore. So these kinds of stories, if they can be built up in the social media ecosystem, it would, you know, present much more positive vibes on the other side of the border.
All right, I think looking at the time and the organizers, I think we are at the end of our session. Just one last question, I think, just to end the session. For both of you, Professor and Andrew, how do you see your aspirations in terms of understanding the way moving forward for our global supply chain, especially when it comes to Johor and Singapore?
Keep plugging at it. It's a long-term play. Look for good examples and use cases like what Andrew said, and keep building trust so that over time we can see the development of these iconic projects or these, you know, 100 projects in 10 years. And, you know, 10 years down the road, I think with the RTS, with other linkages, maybe even a third bridge, better logistical connectivity, I think this would be something that, you know, not just ASEAN would be proud of, but the entire region of the world would be looking at as the next Shenzhen, Hong Kong development ecosystem.
I think building on this concept of trust is also to think big and to dream. We are neighbors, and our reality is that we have to work with one another. So I think on that basis, we need to be able to do things that and imagine beyond what other people are doing. So I think that is something that we hopefully can be able to build up over time.
All right, thank you so much, Professor and Mr. Andrew. Thank you both for the insights and the real talk. It's clear that supply chains aren't deglobalization. They're just smarter, more political, and a lot more regional. And in that story, Johor isn't just reaching, it has a chance to lead. And let's keep the conversation going. Thank you so much, everyone. And passing back to you, Fadila. Thank you.
Because next up, we move into the fireside chat that will take a strategic look at Johor's potential, not just as a bridge to Singapore, but as a key regional economic player. And how can the Johor strengthen its influence in trade, infrastructure, and innovation? And to discuss more about the topic, not just cross-border access, but regional influence, I would like to invite on stage our moderator, Ms. Tamina Kausji, independent broadcast journalist, partner, and comms director, The Big Picture Communication. Please welcome.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. A very good morning, everyone. I trust we're caffeinated enough now after that coffee break to continue on with the discussion. Very important topic, of course, but first and foremost, perhaps I could call on stage to join me, our very esteemed speaker for the session, Dr. Melati Nungsari. Now, Dr. Melati is Deputy CEO, Deputy Dean of Research and Academics, Associate Professor 2 of Economics, and Faculty Director of the ASEAN Research Center, ARC, at Asia School of Business. She's also a research affiliate at MIT Sloan School of Management. So I've got a real short, brief intro to just place us within this conversation, especially today. 8th of July has been quite the morning already. It's a brave new world, ladies and gentlemen, of only 24 days away from a 25% potential tariff from the US on all Malaysian imports. This is, of course, going to press our key sectors, electronics, metals, palm oil, and at the same time, this is a sharp escalation in the global protectionist wave. So the rules of trade are changing fast and hard. And the question now is, can Johor adapt before the window closes or shifts on the 1st of August? So this is an era of fragmented globalization. The question now becomes, can Johor move goods or talents across borders? But at the same time, more importantly, Johor moving ideas, standards, and policy influence across a region in flux. Johor has, of course, attracted over $30 billion ringgit in manufacturing FDI last year alone. So that is scale. But scale does not necessarily translate into influence. So here we are today to discuss all of that and more. And Dr. Melati, I'd like to begin by us talking about what I just referred to. So we often talk about moving goods and talent across borders, but in today's global economy, that's clearly not enough. Let's start off this conversation by you telling us a little bit more on your thoughts about Johor taking the leadership role that it could to move ideas, influence, as well as agenda.
Thank you, Tamina, and thank you so much for having me, everybody. So I think in order for Johor to position itself and to actually have more regional influence, there's a number of things that needs to happen, but I think one is actually thinking more of a rule maker than actually a rule taker or a player. And what do I mean by that? So I'm going to become a little bit more academic now. And I want us to kind of think more of systems, so systems thinking, rather than what I call transactional thinking. And what does that actually mean? So when we're solving transactional problems, it's sort of like courting kind of one-time investments, right? So I see a problem, I see a solution, that's it. It's all about maximizing efficiency, it's quick. Systems thinking, kind of more influence building thinking, is going to be more thinking about the problems, right? Thinking about the relationships between different kind of power aspects to each other. Thinking about what influences one over the next. So I really think that in order to become more of a regional influence, Johor has to start thinking a bit more systematically and more systems thinking about all of these various issues. Now, I just wanted to touch about three kind of things about, again, rule making and not rule taking. One is thinking about perhaps like regional green logistics standards. That's one thing that kind of popped up this morning. A lot of people were talking about logistics quite a bit. Thinking about digital manufacturing benchmarks. We heard about the ENE standards. We heard a lot about potentially, robotics, innovation, stuff like that. So thinking about basically using or piloting different kind of standards and then Asianizing it out. That is another suggestion. And also one thing I would like to see more is seeing more, maybe Cerebrum can actually do more of this, ASEAN level or Asian level policy frameworks or policy kind of roundtables in Johor itself to position Johor as a place where people come to learn, a place where people come to innovate, a place that creativity comes to prosper. So I think that a more ambitious, and I think either Ken Ming or Andrew sitting here was saying something about dreaming bigger. That is sort of what I see Johor has to do in order for this to happen.
Absolutely, dreaming bigger, right? But at the same time, I think 5-year national plans, for example, we've also got 13 Malaysia plan coming up soon and into force. But all of this, perhaps the timeline is a little too long, especially in these days.
Yes.
So what could perhaps more localized, policy-based think tanks that grow up from the grassroots in Johor be able to do and position Johor?
Yep. So I think the first thing to note here is that we are in a very strange time in the human race. Unfortunately, and this is going to be an answer that frustrates a lot of people, I think the main key thing that GLCs and companies and the state can do right now is really be very open-minded to constant change. So the issue with a lot of these problems is they're going to be structural. So I hope we get to touch education in a bit later on, but investments in talent, investments in education, these are things that need to happen, but these are things that you need to invest in for a very long time before you see any sort of fruit, right? So before and as we're kind of focusing on reskilling, upskilling, making sure our people have the right skills, and not only as modes that we then ship off to other states or to Singapore, for example, we also need to think about this idea of agility, right? So what does it mean to be agile? It means you need to be able to host more sandboxing. You need to be able to take risks and fail. Need to be open to these possibilities of basically things not working out, right? So that's what agility means. And I think that is what we need to be open to in the near future. That's sort of the game plan, I think, for the next couple of years.
And the near future means as soon as Q4 of this year.
Yes.
Absolutely. So of course, with weaker peers, there's also an opportunity for Johor to be a stronger voice in ASEAN as well, for not just SEZ, but also digital growth standards. But let's move from there into institutional capacity. Now, Malaysia's economic and political structures being as they are, long-term influence does also require institutional stamina. We're not just talking about quick wins. Let's talk about how Johor's GLCs, state agencies, and policy architects can actually be key drivers in this, not just waiting on the sidelines for an invitation to participate.
Yeah, that's very good. So institutional muscle is one thing that I can kind of talk about for a very, very, very long time. But I've sort of kind of split my thoughts into a couple different pieces. So I think that it would be very nice to see like a Johor Futures unit, kind of similar to, and I looked up, in Singapore they have the Center for Strategic Futures. So it's basically a government think tank that does scenario planning, long-term assessments, thinking about potentials of what could happen and sort of what are we safeguarding against that. I think something sort of very regional-based, but sort of cross-border policy coordination-based would be something very good for Johor. And I think one other thing that I personally have worked on quite a bit in my own work is redesigning KPIs to kind of improve more regional spillover metrics. So it's not only about like internal kind of capabilities or productivity measures, but it's also perhaps, how many companies benefit from MNC chains. For example, how many joint research outputs or how many patents that were co-produced between different countries, for example. So kind of internationalizing a little bit. I think Ken Ming may agree with me on this, but Malaysia itself is a fairly small market compared to kind of the global chaos that's happening with us. And one way we need to kind of safeguard around this is internationalizing a little bit. So thinking about regional spillover metrics would be a good way. And then the other thing that I think would be very helpful is to learn from successful case studies in a very meaningful way. I do a lot of what I call action research. So that involves, going to companies and then figuring out by staying with them for a year or so, following them, their journey, learning specifically what works for them, what doesn't, what can I take back to my teams that work for me. I think that J Corp in particular is very well positioned to upskill your people by placing them strategically in industries and countries maybe for a little bit, kind of like mini secondments in a way that makes sense. So like Shenzhen was brought up just now. In industries where you would like to go further, place your people there, make them learn, and then kind of build from that.
Absolutely. I'm hearing you a lot when it comes to the short-term KPIs trap, right?
Yep.
Because quite often when you're collating these institutional numbers for investments. They are just quarterly led metrics. So as Dr. Melati was saying, there's a real opportunity now to look at policy scorecards where actually it can measure institutional export of norms as well as the amount of foreign dollars that are flowing in. From there, Dr. Melati, let's move on into the Johor-Singapore axis. Now, when we talk about Johor-Singapore conversations, they quite often get reduced to border crossings. But what would it take for Johor to actually have become more than a complementary node and be the one actually directing the policy and also being the architect of wider ranking norms?
Thank you. So just to have give a little bit of a background. So I had lunch yesterday with somebody from a private company who was telling me about how anxious they were about the RTS because they were worried that the RTS would kind of make it almost make all of the talent that they spend a lot of time training and stuff like that kind of obsolete in the sense because they would just be shipped off to Singapore. Now, I think that to some extent that can be true, but I think what Johor should be thinking about, and then again, remember thinking about like rule making, right, rather than rule taking, is like how can we use this to our advantage, right? How can we dictate more of where people move? Because people will move. I think one assumption that we can has been proven over and over again in the history of mankind is that people will move, right? It's just, you need to give people a reason to stay, like we talked about before. Why should they stay in Johor? Now, there are a couple different reasons why. I'm going to propose, I think, two. The first one is sandboxing. I would like to really propose sort of Johor as a way to sandbox, test out different things that maybe a bit tighter, perhaps, than what we have here. So experiment, right? See what works, what doesn't. Companies love experimenting, so that would be kind of a nice thing. And the other thing, and coming back to, and I'm an academic, and I think J Corp is very well positioned to do this, it would be lovely to see a Johor-based Asian, purely Asian, think and do tank, right? One that brings together experts from around the world, industry experts, academic experts, in a way that promotes innovation, right? Similar to what a lot of Taiwanese institutions are doing, where they bring, the greatest minds from all sides of the world into one place. The same thing can be done in Johor. There's no reason. And so if there is an agglomeration of talent, of wonderful people doing really cool things for the economy, people will come, right? And so the balance will kind of shift. So I see a lot of opportunities for Johor, and I think focusing on, how can Johor differentiate itself, I think is sort of the key. A rule maker, not taker. Yes.
Rule maker, not taker. Now also, there is the opportunity, given the fact that Johor has attracted so much, an influx absolutely of data center investments. Singapore, on the other hand, paused any new investments in 2019 due to resource restrictions. Johor, on the other hand, has benefited a lot from this, but at the same time, there are also pressures on environmental resources. So there's an opportunity here to perhaps lead when it comes to sustainable AI infrastructure, now that you are already confirmed that you're going to be the location. We move on from there, ladies and gentlemen, into pondering a lot longer on the talent and thought leadership question, being as in that human capital is ultimately the one which is going to drive all of these engines. So let's talk about talent, Dr. Melati. You 24/7, 365, your work is actually cultivating the minds of the future. So when it comes to a bold future fit talent blueprint, perhaps for Johor, and this perhaps is really timely given that JSSEZ is in motion, the wheels are turning, August the 1st is fast approaching. What can be done to accelerate the talent pipeline and stop it from bleeding out?
Yeah, so this is a very, very good question, and I think one that perhaps merits a longer discussion, but to sum it up, so remember when I was talking about agility, the ability to pivot, like trying out things that maybe don't work, I really do feel like the nature of education is changing. A lot of what people will tell you is that, micro-credentials need to be the answer to this, that you need to get certifications that are not maybe tied to degrees and stuff like that, because those are quick, right? Like I can reskill you, Tamina, for example, through a micro-credential in the next quarter, and you can be done, right? But I think the other kind of piece of this, and Johor is very strong in education, But the other piece of this is actually the states can take a more active role in sort of promoting these very quick credentialing as actually a proper entry point to jobs. So the thing that is missing from this micro-credential kind of discussion or this re-credentialing discussion is actually whether employers will accept it as a legitimate kind of form of knowledge, right? And that is not actually clear. So I think that if Johor can take a step in sort of educating, like, why do we need these kind of credentials? Well, the reason is things are changing so fast. We need to reskill our people constantly. Our managers now who don't know any AI now need to know what AI is, and so they need some sort of certification. You should accept that kind of credentialing as being kind of a proof of mastery, right? So I think states need to start pushing a bit more towards that, and I think Johor is in a very good position to do that. So imagine, you know, if like 50% of your workforce will be rendered obsolete, you need to figure out what to do with them. And one way is to give them new skills actually so that they can, you know, build different futures with you. In Johor, preferably.
In Johor, preferably. And for that, I'm actually going to pick out a data point from DOSM, the Department of Statistics Malaysia, that showed in 2023, more than 50% of Johorians who were tertiary educated actually migrated into Selangor, Singapore, and other areas for work. So they are not staying in Johor. So the key now is to ensure that they stay in Johor, but also at the same time, there's an opportunity to, like Dr. Melati was saying, looking at upskilling, and in particular when it comes to AI. So there's another statistic that speaks to us here, which is that only about 18% of Malaysian workers are ready at all when it comes to AI-related skills, and our Johorian SMEs rank among the top, together with those from other states, with regards to lack of preparedness when it comes to AI skills for workers. So let's look at actionable solutions then. Let's look at those who are quite often left out of the conversation. All states, including Johor, also have a large informal labor force. How can we ensure that they are also part of it and they also become equipped to perhaps take on gig work, which is increasingly also going to become agentic and AI related?
So that's also, I think, part of the reason why this credentialing aspect is so important. So a lot of state governments, for example, do a lot of reskilling for women returning to work, right? So women tend to drop out of the labor force for having kids, and then they want to return, and then they realize their skill sets from 15 years ago are no longer relevant. The idea is, how do you bring them back? And traditionally, credentialing has sort of been a way to kind of get that back in. But again, the state has to back these credentialing and these sort of different types of non-degreed kind of ways of acquiring knowledge as proper kind of accepted ways of gaining knowledge, right? Because or else these people will not be able to basically be upskilled. So I would like to see a bit more thought and policy put into meaningful retransition back into the formal workforce for informal workers, people who are trying to transition back and stuff like that. And the second thing is social support systems have to be very strong, right? So thinking about the systems thinking, if I could just end with this one example. So let's say you see a very crowded hospital and you look at the emergency room and there are no beds, right? So transactional thinking would mean you say, okay, so I need to build more beds, or I need more doctors, or I need to build another building because I need to put more beds in. But actually, it's a whole systems thing, right? It's thinking about nutrition. It's thinking about, why are there so many people in the hospital? It's thinking about education. Are people making the right life choices? It's a whole social system support, right? So it really needs to kind of come from the ground up. And again, social support for all residents of Johor need to be strengthened in order for all of this to work. Yes.
Absolutely. Social support becoming the entire framework for things, but at the same time, I'll ponder for a tick on agentic AI. Now, when we talk about agentic AI, completely different from Gen AI, ChatGPT, etc., those conversations have been happening for the past 18 months. The term that you need to keep affixed is agentic AI, because that's actually what's going to result in the new wave of job losses if the upskilling doesn't occur. So there is also perhaps an opportunity now for Johor, a rare opportunity, to actually embed agentic AI apprenticeship tracks into any SEZ-based training. So this would ensure that those youth who are going into these high-paying jobs, starting off at a baseline of 3,000, perhaps even 4,000 ringgit, they are already future-proofed. It doesn't happen after they're inside the system, right? We've got a couple of questions that have come in, and being conscious of time, I'll take the one that pops out the most. Anonymous has also echoed something that we dwelled on earlier, Dr. Melati. They say companies in Johor are afraid of upskilling their workforce.
Yes.
What are the 2 key strategies you can advise for talent retention to the companies in Johor who are going to put up?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I keep on getting, I did recently a training for this unnamed bank in Malaysia, multinational bank, unnamed. And they had a similar concern. They were like, why should we invest in people when we don't actually know how to retain them and stuff like that? And I think that fundamentally companies basically need to ask, like, what are you willing to do for your staff, right? Are you willing to reskill them, which takes time? Are you willing to basically prepare them to be exited, which is another kind of strategy, right? Or are you willing to sort of explore this, tumultuous journey of constant chaos with them? I think this is sort of a company level answer that needs to happen. Now, I think that even if AI displaces 50% of your workforce, which is very likely for a lot of industries, including mine, academics for a long time thought we were not vulnerable to this, but we completely are. I mean, there's no reason to hire a professor if you can watch YouTube, very honestly. YouTube videos are quite good now. So there's a lot of internal angst that I have on this, but honestly, we will always need humans to navigate these systems, right? But AI, and there was a recent study that came out, AI is not quite good at complex, systematic thinking, even agentic AI, not there yet, right? And I think it'll take a while for AI to be able to do systems thinking. AI can do transactional thinking much better than you and I. For the longest time, we have sent our children to STEM classes, told them that they need to learn coding, told them that they need to learn math and do well. Completely useless now. For any of you who have worked a lot of AI, you realize that you're obsolete. I have friends who did the PhD with me and say, oh, I'm really glad that I didn't learn how to code in Python because now the ChatGPT just does it for me. And so, that's the world we're looking at, right? So how do we actually progress? Well, I think it's a company level decision. You will always need humans regardless of what the AI can do. It's just what kind of
What kind of humans, right? This reminds me of something I'd read on Mark Cuban's blog, right? The investor and venture capitalist. So he was referring to the Milli Vanilli effect. For those of us old enough, so you've got to be able to do something good enough that you're at the upper end of the extreme, or you're doing something at the much lower end of the extreme, but also doing it really well.
Can I also add, and
sure.
The other thing also to that is I think we need to redefine what a good job means. Even if AI, does a lot of stuff, there's also a lot of value in people who cook our food because as of now, ChatGPT does not have a body, so it cannot cook us food, right? People who provide care work, all of these jobs have traditionally been seen in society as low-value jobs, but that's not true, right? That's the way we have ascribed our values to it. There's no reason that these should be seen as lower-level jobs compared to, what I do, for example. So I think that will slowly change because we can't shove everybody into one box. People will have to occupy different types of professions. And I think care work, for example, will be something that will generate a lot of value and has always generated value, but one thing that society will have to look at a little bit differently with AI.
Absolutely. So even though AI is there, agentic AI is the one actually driving all the changes, but at the same time, plenty more opportunity for youth, for those who are skilled enough and those who are upskilled with agentic AI in mind to lead the pack. So that actually, I think, brings us to the end of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been such an interesting conversation, not only about, it's not about abstract futures though, it's about Johor's next strategic move when it comes to real time. Now the global trade landscape has shifted. Post-Liberation Day tariffs, it may continue to shift on even past the 1st of August. So Johor does stand at a decisive crossroads. Will Johor remain a logistics hub or rise as a regional rule shaper? Thanks to Dr. Melati for all those insights. We hope that they've not only been reflective, but also analytical to help push our institutions, talent pipelines, and also policy ambition beyond comfort zones. Thank you very much for joining us in setting the tone for Johor's regional influence playbook. I'm Tamina Kausji, signing off for now with Dr. Melati.
Thank you.
itself as a competitive trade and investment destination, and through incentive, facilitation and strategy focus amidst global economic uncertainty. And the session will be moderated by Madam No Quek, founder and CEO NQ International, with the topic Monday to Friday in Johor, what is the outlook for trade and investment? And for that, please welcome Madam No.
Pleasure, and thank you to everyone for making this possible. In the interest of time, and I am so impressed actually from the time all the leaders set out earlier part of the morning on the macro picture, the desires of the heart and the mind, followed by the various sessions, including this recent one, which touched on all the relevant topics that we wanted to discuss. And so it makes my job much easier because now they are going to give us their so-called conclusions on where we go going forward. No, I was just kidding. Firstly, let me just welcome our professional panelists, Nataza, who is with in a very interesting position, having been for the longest time with civil service and now trying to blend that with the corporate sector. And Puan Aiza, our so-called digital queen, if I may say. We apologize that our other speaker, Intan, is unable to join us today. Now, we've heard so much about this whole subject of Johor opening up. But what makes me wonder, and I think this, let's just remember that this is only the beginning, it's conversations. What makes me wonder is this is not a who wins or who loses. The 1 + 1 must equal 11. And we're in a very important time in the world, which is looking at crisis at levels we have difficulty understanding, made more challenging with all the transformation that's required from the digital world. So let's first, and we believe in gender equality, so I'm going to let the gentleman start first. Taza, tell us, given all that you've heard this morning and what you've been doing, because I know you've been crossing the causeway quite a bit, working with various organizations to bring this topic, mutually understood by all. What is your biggest challenge today?
As you have rightly mentioned, now is the so-called the perfect time for us looking all the what is happening now in Johor. And I would say that the number one challenge for us is the change of the mindset. Because looking at both private and public, we have to collaborate. And I have a first-hand experience on that, coming from, I've worked across different government agencies and dealing with some of the officers. So in the public sector, we have been trained to manage risks and to follow procedures. While in the private sector, the culture is more agile and more commercial. So bridging those two cultures requires trust and openness to learn from each other. And so the thing about as simple as fast-tracking definition, it brings a different understanding for government officer or to the tech investor, just for that fast-tracking definition. So, but I believe that this is the moment where everything is, probably this is the best time that everything is aligned. And we're looking at the policy, we're looking at the talent, we're looking at the infrastructure. If you look at the RTS link, for example, progressing very well. The special economic zone taking shapes, and clear indication by both government to unlock new economic value across border. So I would say that, yes, everything is now at the right moment, at the right time, aligned, but the mindset is the first thing that we need to change.
Well said, Natasha. In fact, as I said earlier, it's not a question of who wins and who loses. Both must win. It's a 1 + 1 = 11, to be honest. And you also touch on a very important word, which is trust. And so the mindset change combined with what the crisis in the world today, if we look at what's happening, and this morning's news was, again, something very interesting, but whether it changes over the coming days or weeks, we'll know in time. But we can't afford to wait for these changes to happen. We must take advantage of opportunities. And ASEAN is looking very interesting today. Malaysia within ASEAN is looking extremely interesting. Singapore is eager to work and has to work with ASEAN to make this bloc even more powerful today. I'm 75. I've had like 5 decades of working experience. And I can tell you that I've seen 6 crises. And with every crisis came opportunity. This is our opportunity. But it's made complicated also with, and we heard a lot about AI, and tell us, Aiza, you're coming from that sector, and listening to what Hanaf has said, what do you think needs to be done to bring the two together so we get to a situation which is manageable, promising, and at the end of the day, useful to the whole region and consequently the whole world?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I have to say thank you to Johor Corp for inviting me over to be on stage. Incidentally, I just have to let everyone know I'm from Penang, and now I feel that I'm the most beloved adopted daughter of Johor, because they never really invited me on stage to talk about digital transformation. They're lost. Anyways, jokes aside, I think I have to say at the moment it feels very nervous to have Professor Ong Kian Ming next to me, like right in front of me. I've been fangirling you for a long time. But what is important was you set the stage. And then I think Dr. Melati came in and just gave us a whole new perspective of how it can be for Johor. And I totally agree with them. So it almost feel like I'm an imposter talking about this. Now, you mentioned, there were mentions about iconic projects in Johor. And you should always try and find those iconic projects, land it in Johor, and plant your flagpole and say this is what we are doing. My question to not just Johor, the whole entire Malaysia, we have been talking so much about digital transformation. It's no longer transformation, this is life. But as it is life, it's also transient, because digital transformation can only last for a couple of minutes, because otherwise, if you don't catch up on it, you'll be left behind. The question is, what do you have here that would actually help Johor to be, on the map? You are already on the map. Johor is very interesting, very exciting, and not because of Singapore, my apologies, but because of Johor and your identity. You're fast moving, you're taking things to new conversations. We are having this conversation today. But let me just share you, after being the CEO of MySejahtera and before that in MDEC, I have seen hypothesis on paper. I mean, my team actually sat down and talked about national data sharing policy, and then we talked about AI policy. Those are hypotheses. Have I seen this on, being implemented in Malaysia? Not really. Whether this is around the world, not really. So what I've done when I quit the job, or I've given up my job as the CEO of MySejahtera, at that point, we have 52 million data sets on MySejahtera platform, and that's huge. But we can do nothing about it because the trust is missing. So I looked around the world and I landed in most parts in GCC. I looked at Dubai, I looked at Riyadh. Riyadh is right now they created a company run by Tariq Hussein, if I'm not mistaken, his name is. They are building AI infrastructure for the world. So that's a lofty ambition that they have. And the company is called Humane. And then Dubai, for example, is not, they sell land of the dreams to everybody, which I think Johor, with the climate and also places to go and our hospitality, we can be there too. But what they've done differently is make it easier for entrepreneur in digital transformation or in AI, whatever technology, and promising residency, saying that you come in, you get into one of the digital media city, and we promise you residency in maybe a couple of years' time, 5 years. If you have 2 million right now, invest in us, you get your golden visa. For people in transformation and digital, those kind of promises, even though it's short-lived for just a couple of years, those are the promised land, because we want to try transformation in digitalization elsewhere. I'm going to pause here for a while because I think Tashmina spoke about agentic AI, and which is what I'm doing right now, advising a company based in the UK, run by a fellow Malaysian in healthcare. But I'm going to pause and maybe just give you a bit of a cliffhanger, and we'll move on to another topic.
Very thought-provoking, thank you. I've just come back from the Middle East, an area that I'm very busy in. And I'd say that also when I was sitting in a panel by the Financial Times 2 months back, I realized that, frankly, in the Middle East, people were taking everything to be equal in the world. And I gently reminded them that it's not, because the culture of each place has also to be taken into account, which is why it is very important in the Singapore-Johor collaboration that we understand and respect. When we do that, we build trust. And when you build trust, you can move ahead, knowing fully well, timely and watching developments, that you will achieve your objective. Of course, it is very important that we believe in what we do. Ataza, tell me, in all that you're doing now, I'm going to go back again to the people collaboration that you have, the challenges that you face in changing people's mindsets, not only here, and not only in Johor, in Malaysia, Singapore, Malaysia, ASEAN, and globally, because people are going to look at Johor on that basis.
Yeah, right. I think Johor is at this sweet spot right now for a few reasons. Firstly, you mentioned about ASEAN. So the broader ASEAN momentum is very real. And if you look at the governance specifically on Malaysia, we compared to Singapore, Malaysia we have these 3 layers of the government: federal, states, local authority, the pihak berkuasa tempatan. So it makes things more fun to deal with all the stakeholders.
That's
I use the word
good way
fun.
to look at it.
And at the same time, what we are doing now, again, this is the change of the mindset, looking how the stars are aligned. This is a quote from the Chief Minister. Now the stars are aligned. This is probably one of the moments that we need to take a step back, reset everything, and come up with a good plan. So the way forward for us is, number one, looking at how we manage people. We have this strategy of coming up with the IMFCJ, Invest Malaysia Facilitation Center, where is a one-stop or entry point for an investor to come in and deal with us at the front end. At the same time, at the back end process, where all the PBTs, the technical agency, we come up with the creative ways of coming up with the SLA, service level agreement. for turnaround time, because we keep on getting inquiries from the investor, repeatedly asking, we need clarity, we need a turnaround time that is very predictive turnaround time. So in terms of issuance of the permit, license, incentives, so we need to come up with a solution. How are we going to streamline across all these three layers of the government, federal, state, and the local authority? I mean, compared to Singapore, for example, EDB, I was told that EDB is an end-to-end process and end-to-end kind of a facilitation. From day one, you open up a company, they can track how many hours does it take to form a company, and submission to the local authority, to the issuance of the CCC and license to start the operation or commissioning. So it's end-to-end kind of a dashboard system where you can track. But for us, these are the real challenge that we have to overcome and come up with a good proposition to the investor.
Thank you. Although the end-to-end is a different end-to-end from what I understand as a banker. You know, all the procedures these days, we have that wonderful AI that can take care of it, which means that much of the processes could actually be more expedient being done in the tech manner. And that does raise a question of how people and their roles are going to be impacted, let alone the fact that we heard earlier that the more knowledgeable ones in Johor, for example, were looking out or going out. You know, would they come back? Would they add to what's being done? That's one. The other thing is on the end-to-end, the people factor is so important. As a banker, we know when we meet clients individually, if we did anything, and during COVID, everything was not face-to-face. But there's a big difference when you meet people face-to-face. And therefore, Isa, I want to ask you, how does one then manage to bring together what has just been said about how the structure is working with what you see as can and should be done to make it more expedient so that people can turn around and say, well, yeah, good timing. I not only had a response fast enough, but after that I met the right people, they knew exactly what to do, they followed through with the project, I was able to, they were able to measure the effectiveness, they were able to come back to me what's missing, and you know, that is the most critical, and time is of the essence.
That's a very challenging question, and I have a very short answer to that. I don't know. Because the formula doesn't seem to work in a way that is all-encompassing, no. There are expectations, there are differences in expectations. You go to a bank, you expect it to be served. You come to hospitals and you expect it to be served very quickly. I mean, Dr. Melati used a very good, I would say, modeled about how digitalization or AI can work better in healthcare. Healthcare is very close to my heart right now because this is what I'm doing. I've taken leave and actually looking more into digitalization or AI in healthcare. So I don't have the answers to that, but what I do want everyone here to think, especially Johor Corporation, see, everyone goes to public. I mean, having a conversation on stage or even having a dinner party conversation, everybody's talking about AI. But the digital economy is still on a linear economy. So there's extract, and then you use, or you make, and then you use, and then you waste, you throw it away. Everybody is just focusing on probably the middle part and the origination of the value chain in terms of, oh, let's speak about AI. But nobody really cares about the end of the value chain. I have not heard anyone in all the panels that I've attended or actually listen or be on the panel that talked about digital waste. And that is currently right now a huge opportunity that no one is taking it yet.
Sorry, so, can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
Can you just define digital waste?
Very good. So can I have my slide angel to just put up the slides that I've prepared very quickly. And this is not my statistics. This is taken from the United Nations Conference of Trade and Development. And you can see a staggering carbon emission, you can see a staggering e-waste. When you talk about e-waste, for example, Dato, you are using your phone, you're probably making WhatsApps, and then maybe 2 months later or 2 years later, Celcom comes to you and say, you know, I've got a new generation of Apple iPhone, I'm just going to give it to you for free. What happened to the previous phone that you used? Nobody asked that question. Those are digital waste. And then data centers, you see the data centers electricity use is a lot. Water for cooling system. I mean, I've got the statistics, but I would probably encourage you to look at the Digital Economy Report of 2024. Then the next slide. Data centers is equal to France total electricity used. And then you've got carbon footprint. We've been talking about carbon footprint for me at least 10 years ago when I was in PwC. We talked about this. But we only looked at shipping company, we looked at manufacturing company, but quite frankly, for digitalization, everybody thinks we're up in the cloud, nothing is on earth. We are more on earth than other industry because to make phones, data center cables, those are raw materials. And then you have the e-waste crisis right now. I know no one can see at the bottom, but 24% collected, just 7.5% in developing countries. What about us? What are we doing about it? So can you go to the next slide, please? Rather than we focus right now in improving processes, because I think that we need to do it, I think Johor, you are far more sophisticated. So what is your call to action? What are you doing in terms of attracting the right talents? It need not be just local. You can have a hub that calls in, let everyone come in and survive on their own. I know it sounds a bit like Hunger Games, but that's what it is in startups. That's what it is in digital transformation. The startups and the corporate startups, the venture entrepreneur in residence for big corporations, even as you know, I kind of pioneered e-wallet in Malaysia with a company that shall not be named today. But right now, who's the biggest digital bank? Which company? And we started it. My name was there when we first started it, and we were the pioneers in that particular industry. But where is it now? So this is something that I put up because I have fallen in love with Johor for a very long time. So these are the things that I thought maybe Johor Corporation can think about it rather than really focus on process improvements.
Yeah, thank you, Aiza. But this is the kind of questions I, wearing a lay person's head, ask. Who's going to be able to answer those, if not for the experts? I mean, it's easy to raise these issues, but somebody who's an expert's got to come up with viable solutions. You know, and so, Natasha, I want to get back to the people issue again, because your challenge in changing mindsets of civil service, I mean, we have the same thing in Singapore, right? Civil service with this, the private sector, then having to look at 3 people being reduced to 2 because, or less, because automation's going to come in. And now we have all these automation issues, yeah? And we have a timing issue of making sure we achieve the objectives that have been set out. So in setting the objectives for Johor, how or who or what has to be done to make sure that the mind-changing process of civil service, private sector, the authorities who are making sure that compliance and everything is done right, together with the changes on, it has to be working together. So it cannot be that one sort of says these are the issues and the other one is trying to grapple with it. Your comments.
It's a very tough question. I think it is a collective effort from all layers, including all the ustad and the professional, the government, I mean everyone. Is totally the social society, government working together as one. Again, this is the opportunity of a lifetime for us to change. And talking about people, working with people, we don't have a button, a physical button. So you need to touch on the mind and the heart. So that's where it is something that you don't have in a textbook, a manual, how to change people. Is very dynamic and at the same time also challenging, because looking at the geopolitics of what is happening around the world, and now relatively and basically this part of the world, ASEAN, is where in the world that we still live in peace and very good in doing business. But again, coming back to you, dealing with the people, I mean, this is something that it's not as easy as dealing with a machine or a system. I just would like to add on that technology and digital part, which is something still a challenge. Apart on top of the people is I think the data integration is something that we are still lacking of. Every agency, every department, they have their own system, but integration is one of the challenge, a big hurdle for us on top of the people. But again, I am very optimistic because now we have a very strong leadership. And at the same time, we have this as easy as a platform to bridge the private and public together to set a new standard. And at the same time, looking at the willingness to cooperate today is very much stronger even back to 2 or 3 years ago. So I think this is something can be done, but it's going to be a collective effort by every level of society.
You've said some gems in that statement. And actually, you know, from what we're seeing, with the trust that we're now having, both sides, in wanting to make this happen, one of the best things, and I'd like to suggest this, one of the best things actually is for sharing of mindsets. If we've had situations where we faced challenges and we overcame it, if we had situations where we're facing difficulties, speak it out, discuss it, sharing best practice. I think that, you know, in the subsequent discussions on this subject, it is very good to share ideas because that's the only way to win. We are, in the interest of time, shall I be looking at the questions? Okay. We have one anonymous question, and I think we only have time for one before we round up, right? Currently, under the SEZ incentives, it is to attract large FDIs. What is Johor's roadmap building Johor's tech startups since this is the most opportune time? I think we touched on that subject a little bit earlier on, but you might want to use this opportunity to kind of like summarize what you just said.
I have 2 ideas on this. One is, because again, I mentioned about that federal, state, and local authority. Basically, the incentive under the purview of the federal government. But for the fiscal, I think non-fiscal is something that state can do something about it, for the non-fiscal part. So I would say that we are coming up with a blueprint for the SEZ, Special Economic Zone, under the Kementerian Economy, coming out soon, somewhere in September. And this is a good time for us to come out with a stakeholder engagement, including with the respective SMEs, startup, and all the parties that's concerned about how they are going to participate in this. So it's going to be, I believe there's going to be a roundtable discussion, data collection for us to come up with a concrete one-stop document reference for the Special Economic Zone. So I think non-fiscal is something that state can do something about it, offer speedy approval, licensing, permits, that falls under the state purview. And number 2 is we are coming up with a blueprint for the Special Economic Zone, and we're going to engage and have a lot of roundtable discussion with all the stakeholders.
Excellent. You know, Nadaza, you've just mentioned some very constructive action plans, and hopefully these are followed up with flexible, you know, arrangements to make changes if necessary. and sharing that experience with as many as possible, so everybody is kind of aligned and is optimistic. Now, Isa, now that you have identified what hasn't been done and should be done, what would your priorities be, given that you are an expert in this area, to at least initiate that, encourage that, and lead that in a way to the right entities?
I think I paid no to say that I'm an expert. But I have to say I'm humbled by it. But no one, if someone comes to you and say, I'm a digital expert, take it with a pinch of salt, because there's no such thing. But for Johor Corporation, Johor as a state, I understand you're talking about layers, because I went through that the past 10, 20 years of my life, launching digital abilities and capabilities. But what's important is to be focused and understand that, again, you had gems that have been talked about today. I mean, Prof, you talked about digital twin. You're right, there's no use cases at the moment. But look at those things, as in find businesses that really focus on those areas. And understand MVP means minimum viable products, not maximum viable products. I think that's also the mistakes that I've done before. With AI, yes, there's a huge revolution around AI at the moment, but I'm going to give some comfort, because I do build certain agentic AI, right? Myself, it's not very good, but I'm trying to do it. What I've found is people my generation, I'm not too sure if anyone here is actually older, but let's just say born in 1970s or 1960s, don't be afraid of using AI, because the more you can instruct AI, the better outcome you can get, and it will lose its hallucinations. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter what someone come to you and say, look, AI is going to take over the world, it's not. So some of the focus that Johor can look like, given all the incentives that you've got, businesses that are really in maybe healthcare industry, some form of manufacturing, but do help them. Tax benefits is good, tax credits even better, make them pay to you first. Tuan Haji Natasha, Nataza, then after that give them credits when they're actually successful. Dr. Melati also proposed a few KPIs and cross-border framework where you can position Johor as the ASEAN leader, the ASEAN bloc leader, but do focus, have your focus in certain areas. I don't have the direct answer right now, but what is important are those that I've mentioned, the e-waste, the AI, agentic AI, those are the buzzwords now, and it can be done,
Well, you've heard from the experts, Ataza, Isa, and all the rest who spoke earlier on. It is very, very clear that everybody is enthusiastic, and one of the dangers I found in the half-century work experience that I've had, and by the way, I was born in 1950. In all of that, one of the things that stands out is everybody is so enthusiastic that each entity wants to do its own thing. Working together so that you have a base of a common mindset is so critical. Otherwise, you're going to find that different entities are doing different things, and at the end of the day, to achieve the objective might not happen or take much, much longer. With that, I want to thank everybody for this wonderful session. As the song goes, we've only just begun. So with that, I wish all of you well again. Assalamu alaikum. And thank you so much again.
Take a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our final session, and this panel will address Johor's unique build as they invest model. With ambitious infrastructure plans underway, is the flexible approach efficient? Is a pragmatic or problematic approach? And to discuss further on this topic, I would like to invite Encik Aziz Rashid, Head of Private Equity Real Estate Jalan Group, to the stage to moderate this panel session. Please welcome.
For most of the developments all this while, but with the rapid expansion of infrastructure in Johor with the new LRT, logistics hubs, and nearly 50 data centers in Johor itself, either operating or being planned, we are dealing with land, power, water, and timing challenges all at once. So the traditional build as they invest model promises flexibility, but could it also risk delays? Could it also risk fragmented development or even missed opportunities? Today we have three outstanding leaders from planning and policy, finance, and real estate development to explore what it takes to make this model work. May I call Encik Rudianto Azhar, Director of Economics and Investment Division, Iskandar Regional Development Authority. Rudy is a seasoned executive with over 2 decades of leadership experience in transportation, infrastructure, and regional development. He is currently serving as Director of Economics and Investment at IRDA. His expertise spans public transit, economic planning, and organizational transformation. The next we have on the panel is Dato' Omar Siddiq. Please, Dato'. Welcome, Dato'. Dato' Omar is no stranger to JSSEZ scene. He was here 2 weeks ago as the organizer of the HSBC JSSEZ forum. So this time we got him on stage. Dato' is the CEO and non-independent executive director of HSBC. His prior banking days also was involved in CIMB and RHB Bank. Before that, he was with Malaysia Airlines and Khazanah. So on the national service side, he is also on the advisory council of Yayasan Peneraju Pendidikan Bumiputra. Last but not least, Encik Fazli Zainuddin, Group Chief Strategy Officer of J-Land Group. Fazli is no stranger either, at least to me. He's actually my colleague and literally my neighbor in the office. So, yeah, but I promise not to go easy on him today. Fazli is a corporate guy with over 20 years experience spanning corporate strategy, investment governance. He is also an ESG leadership and strategic comms to drive sustainable and enterprise-wide growth in JLG. So without further ado, let me go straight into the questioning. Perhaps we'll start with you first, Rudy. How does IRDA as the planning authority or agency balance the flexibility of a build as they invest model with the long-term infrastructure planning required to ensure system-wide efficiency, sustainability, and interconnectivity?
Thanks, Aziz. I always hate the first person to start and with very lengthy questions. Now, I'll just go to the core. You mentioned about build as they invest. right? So allow me to set the context, perhaps. The first one is that when we talk about building, here is not only building hard infrastructure, yeah, but also let's look into the soft infrastructure as well. What it means is that hard is like this, the buildings and the industrial parks and all that. And the soft would be about talent, about policy. So when we talk about building as they invest, and as the government, we have to look into both angles. Yeah, we have to be prepared with the hard infra, the power, the water, and all that, but also looking into the soft infra. Yeah, so that is one context. The second context is that what options, what alternative do we have apart from this build as they invest? Would it be a plug and play? Is that a better alternative for Johor at least? Yeah, as opposed to build as they invest? Because now we're talking about as COVID came and probably gone, not entirely, but now the tariff, we're talking about just in case instead of just in time. So would plug and play be better than build as they invest? So part of your question just now is about balancing. So we need to balance between a few things. At least there are three areas that I can think of right now. Number one would be balancing between greenfield versus brownfield. This is about the level of readiness of the area itself. Yeah. So again, the other part that we need to balancing between the readiness of investors themselves versus the readiness of the government ourselves in terms of coming up with those, whether it's hard or soft infra. Right? The third balancing act that the government needs to do, I believe Professor Ong Kiam Meng being part of the administrative last time. Now, the third one would be balancing between exercising fiscal prudence versus smart investment. How do we balance between those two? Between the government ourselves versus participation of the industry. So there are three things that we need to balance. I'll just stop there.
Dato' Omar, maybe the next one is for you. From a financial or investor standpoint, does this build as they invest model offer comfort in risk mitigation, or it creates more concern around delivery uncertainty? Because I think as a financial, for you, timing is everything, delivery on time is crucial.
I think fundamentally what drives banks and the providers of finance is the underlying business case, if you will. I think when we look at Johor in particular, Johor, Singapore, SEZ now, when we go back to Sijori, Iskandar and so on, the fundamentals of Johor as a key investment region is very strong, right? The fact of connectivity, the linkages, not only to Singapore, but also our own ports, our own air connectivity through Senai, our own sort of rail linkages. Those are very clear. We also have a lot of land. We also have a significant ability to and track record of driving projects. We have the rule of law. We have access to people, obviously in talent, and of course we have safety and security, and to a large extent political stability. So those fundamental elements remain, to me, the core of the business case for Johor as an investment destination. Now, the approach that's being taken in terms of build as they invest, I think is more a preference, and I think it's also dictated by the fact that we have learned many things from various projects in the past, and we also are constrained by resources that we have today. So it makes sense to take a more measured approach to ensure that we have, as we identified, 50 projects in 5 years, whatever it is, 20 projects, whatever the timeline and targets have been put out. And so when the projects that come are more considered, are more sort of viable as they stand, as opposed to sort of having a gold rush, right? And in that sense, the job of the state in building the infrastructure in the right measure to support investments as they come make a lot of sense. So from a financial provider perspective, I think it gives greater comfort that there's no overextension, there's no overbuilding, there's no front running in that sense. And we've seen many of those instances, not just in Malaysia, but all over the world. So in that sense, I think it is the right approach. I think it is absolutely something that is going to ensure a lot of resilience and has a lot better risk management to my mind. So in short, yeah, I think it's a very good sort of way forward for Johor SEZ. Thank you.
Okay. All right, noted, Dato'. Fazli, perhaps from your point of view as a developer, is build as they invest model a practical response to infrastructure gaps, or does it risk becoming a bottleneck for growth?
Yeah, thanks, Aziz. Might have a slight view from a banker, because as we know, bankers are quite conservative in their approach.
Yeah.
And real estate developers, although we see this as a pragmatic approach, definitely, yeah, but there is some element of risk that we need to take. Because sometimes prudence can lead to inaction, and inaction can lead to missed opportunities. So, the right balance.
Yeah, Encik already touched on that earlier. So in our case, as a real estate developer, we need to find the right balance. How do we do that, right? And it's about having a right mix of mature locations to develop, as and while you are exploring new ones, like greenfield ones. And there is a lot of data available these days. You can source a lot of data. So when you start your development process through your strategic planning, you can have quite a reasonable foresight about what are the incoming data. We've got a strong business development function within the group. We've got strong research function within the group. Yeah, we've got a lot of connections with industry captains. So we have quite a good gauge of where the demand is coming. So when we say build as they invest or just in case, it's actually somewhere in between. We don't see at JLG, I believe, we don't see that taking a passive approach of only building when people come is the right one. From our perspective, certain infrastructure needs to be ready, especially hard infrastructures. At the same time, we will be the ones also encouraging demand, creating demand, so to speak. Yeah? So by creating ecosystems, becoming the platform where other people can come in. I believe one of the panels earlier also mentioned that when you attract a customer or investor to come in, you shouldn't be attracting just one sole party. Yeah? You could get an anchor, but then subsequently you should also attract the ecosystem players. That will create the circularity. Yeah? So when we build our industrial parks, our residential parks, our projects, what we try to create is this circularity environment, so that there is that codependency between people who comes, and that will then create or leads to further demand coming in. So we create the demand ourselves rather than wait for the demand to come.
Okay, perhaps just a bit more on that point then. So how does JLG manage the development risk and stakeholder expectation at the same time where the infrastructure support follows the investor confirmation, right?
Why are you asking me hard questions? I thought we're friends, man.
I have to appear to be neutral.
we had a deal, man. Well, I think half of my career is talking to bankers like Dr. Omar, and how to convince them that...
You make it sound painful.
But that my projects aren't risky and they should be lending money to me at a favorable interest rate. So so throughout that journey, we kind of understand how stakeholders see and assess projects, yeah? Which also gives that input to us when we go and approach a particular development. Like I mentioned earlier, all of the information that we take, all the decisions that we make are based on data-backed information. Yeah? So there's no guessing game here. Probably 20-30%. I mean, if you look at Jeff Bezos, they'll make a decision based on 50-60% certainty. Yeah, probably in our case, since we are GLC, 70-80%. So risks are having the right supply chain ecosystem is one. For example, in a typical residential project, you only launch or you only begin construction when you've secured more than 30% sales, for example. So risk mitigants are there, will be put in place. Engagement with stakeholders, particularly the financiers, will also give us certain feedbacks on how do we mitigate this risk further to make our projects bankable. Yeah? So far, it's been proven to be successful.
Datuk, if I may ask, from the financial institution's perspective, right, how do mechanisms like blended green finance or green bonds, do you integrate them into the infrastructure development? And does this slow down the process, or does it help expedite the process and, contribute towards sustainable development?
Well, I think when we talk about blended finance and all this sort of thing, at the end of the day, it's a cat by any other name, really. Of course, they have certain criteria and so on, but underlying all of finance is ability to understand that there is a rate of return given the risk that comes into play. Of course, with blended finance, green financing, they have other KPIs that come with it in terms of whether the project underlying has green objectives as well and other sustainability linked objectives. So in the context of Johor Singapore SEZ, I think for specific projects where there's relevance, so for example, renewable energy, I think there's an element opportunity for blended sustainable finance. I don't think there's so much delays in the process. Capital is available and it's quite sort of fungible across countries, but of course it seeks the best return. So in that sense, the business case that needs to be made to the providers of finance is that the specific projects in Johor Singapore make sense, and will provide the best return in that context. So coming back to the point on Johor Singapore is that I think the greatest role that, come back to the point that I said the fundamentals are important. So the greatest role that governments can play, and exactly what I think Professor Ong and Mr. Cheong from Singapore were talking about earlier, was to create the conditions that facilitate the movement of people, the movement of capital, the movement of goods, providing certainty in the regulatory environment. These are the key things that provide the right conditions for success. If you have those, private sector on their own will find a way to make good projects happen. And we see that with, for example, how Penang developed the semiconductor industry, how we have created other hubs across the country. Of course, incentivization helps. That's primarily sweeteners, if you ask me. But by and large, the underlying fundamentals, creating the right conditions, those are the key things that will drive the right projects and also bring the right financiers on board, to my mind.
Okay, that's interesting, Dato'. You said creating the right conditions. Perhaps, Rudy, if I can ask you, what mechanisms are there in place to prevent bottlenecks in terms of when multiple projects trigger infrastructure requirements simultaneously, right? And we are seeing that in Johor now.
We have seen a lot of examples on bottlenecks, especially on data centers and all that. Right? This is where direction needs to be clear. The readiness of policy that I mentioned just now. Well, we were actually very excited to see influx of data centers in the first couple of years, and the fact that the learning points that we could have, taken from our neighbor Singapore, perhaps at the time in all this excitement, we kind of we were welcoming a lot, and better late than never that Johor actually created this Jawatan Kuasa committee for data centers. Yeah, so that's when we instituted policies, regulations, and we asked them to go back and repropose with a better green alternative power and water and all that. So we know that the bottlenecks could be in form of all these resources that we don't have. So that is one. That is one. Now, number two is that the bottlenecks could be from the government ourselves. We are quite ahead in terms of planning. For example, in terms of this digital economy, right? What has been slowing us down actually on this cross-border data flow that we've been talking about this over the last 3 or 4 years, and MDEC has been on it, talking to neighboring countries within ASEAN and the rest. And this is actually not just within ASEAN, but this data flow issue actually is a global issues. So on that note, we need to be able to actually see the potential as well as find ways to work around it, yeah, probably in phases. So I believe through Malaysia as the chair for ASEAN, these are becoming more clear in terms of where to go. But I believe MDEC is going to come back with a few announcements on that. So that is one. Now, a very glaring bottleneck for SEZ especially is talent. Yeah. So through Johor Talent Development Council and all that, and I believe a lot has been done. But if I can touch on specific area on healthcare, especially on nursing and doctors' talent, especially on nursing talent and all that. To debottleneck those issues, we need to take bold and radical action. Through what IRDA is doing now, is actually taking up initiatives, sandboxing initiative. There are 2 sandbox initiatives that we are doing now. One is on nursing talent, another one is on low altitude economy. So I like what our previous speakers was talking about just now, Dr. Ong and also Dr. Melati, talking about let's take failure as the next step. Don't be afraid of failure, and then this is what we need to have to debottleneck. Have a sandbox within Johor, and if it works, then they want me to stop. No worries.
Mike pun nak pergi lunch dah.
Fazli, yeah. There was a lot of talk by Dr. Melati about sandboxing, and even Rudy now mentioned sandboxing, right? I know JLG has some projects in mind which includes the concept of sandboxing, circular economy, and all this, right? And from a developer's perspective, right, what do you need to make this work?
What do I need to make this work?
From regulator, from the financial.
Kita tak discuss ni tadi tu. Yeah, I mean you're right. Obviously we are looking at circularity
looking at developing an innovation sandbox, particularly in Ibrahim Technopolis, yeah, where our flagship project is taking place, where all the data center is today. But it needs to go beyond data center, right? So data center right now, about 700 acres is live, 700 acres, another 700 acres coming on stream. That will be basically the catalyst and the enabler of what needs to come. But then a lot of effort needs to be pulled together to really create this sandbox of innovation, of industry, thought leadership, yeah, industry players, ecosystem players. We recently conducted, or recently we had a study done on our part, trying to understand what is this circular economy, what it means to us, how can we implement it. And one of the things that actually came out of it, or what we understand, is that this circular economy has the potential of reaching 4.5 trillion US dollars in terms of economic value by 2030. So that's a massive, massive amount. So regardless of globalization or Trump 2.0, whatever it is, there are certain aspects in business, particularly in real estate, where it will cut through the noise, right? If the fundamentals are there, fundamentals are strong, and you are building for the future, you're future-proofing it, getting all the right people in the right place, no matter the noise, in the short term, medium term to long term, you will still thrive. Yeah. So coming back to your question of what needs to be the recipe, basically, now masak this sandbox, really is a pulling together of both governmental or regulatory parties, financiers, ourselves, industry players, together to develop this. So I think Dato' Omar also mentioned incentive is one area, but if there's no real sustainable economic benefit that come from this, incentives is just merely icing on the cake. It doesn't translate to something really tangible. So it's about willpower, right? Putting together great minds to think about what can drive a particular industry forward together as a whole, developing the ecosystem together. So that's the platform that we as a real estate developer, not just about creating that hard platform, yeah, the land that you step on, but also that soft platform, that ecosystem, a way for people to actually share ideas, share thoughts, sit down together and create the journey, and Cerebrum definitely is one of the components in this ecosystem.
On that note, Dato', Fazli has mentioned about things that are not just the hardware of it, but also the software side of it, right? The talent development, the bringing the ecosystem together. Now, from a financial perspective, what risk factor or mitigation plan would you recommend for developers like Fazli to make this work over the long term?
Well, that's the thing. I think maybe just digressing a little bit, I think I've had the opportunity over time to be involved in Johor in a little small way. I think from the days of Iskandar, when I was in Khazanah and Dr. Syed and Dr. Bhatt and on the whole gang who were around. What I really see this time, I think that the biggest change is that there is more joining of hands. So the ecosystem, as I was talking, works. I think we have state government, federal government, the state GLCs, government GLCs, but also Singapore coming into the mix. And I think we're really trying to address the fundamentals, right, in terms of building up the what we talked about, or the strengths of Johor as a proposition, ensuring that we create that right facilitation. For example, the RTS is a living testament to that, and hopefully the the QR immigration thing works as well. These are the things that make this region so attractive as a business proposition. It enables the freedom of movement of people and goods and services. It allows people to have the clarity of investment and direction and regulation. Now, obviously for business investors, whether you're a real estate player or whether you are a manufacturer or whether you're a financial services player, I think the key things, these are the things that we need. We need to understand that there is a commitment from government, there's a commitment from everyone to make this a success. Having all of that, it then is incumbent on any business investor to then assess, as well as understand the risks and make the right decisions. So for example, if you're a manufacturer coming to set up in Johor today, we know that talent is tight. It is a real issue, whether it's in Penang or anywhere in Semenanjung, getting engineering talent is tight. But understanding that, you then have to come up with your own mitigating initiatives, like whether you source talent from elsewhere and get government to approve, whether you're willing to pay slightly more, as some people talk about, but that obviously is not good from a government perspective in terms of wage inflation, but some in government feel that's good, I don't know. But the point is, it is incumbent on the business investor to understand the facts and make the proposition, do out the business case, as far as you were talking about, do out the strategic plan, etc., and then present it to the financiers, whether it's debt holders or equity holders, right? As long as something works in and of itself, you will be able to secure that funding, there's no issue. And given that you locate it in Johor, where there's so much to meet today that makes sense from a business proposition, I think that just enhances the business case. Sorry.
Thank you, Dato'. I mean, perhaps we've been discussing about build as they invest infrastructure, right? So looking at probably the other extreme, should we liberalize infrastructure development? And I'm referring specifically to the hardware, right? Like water, power, utilities. And this goes back to Prof. Ong's comments about having autonomy at the local level, like what Kulim is doing, expedited approval process, independent power grid, things like that. Perhaps I can start with Rudy first.
Right. This is where, yes, touching back on the third area that I mentioned just now, in fiscal prudence and smart investment. Yeah. So yes, it may work because you have seen that many investors now, they are taking the matters themselves in terms of, for example, water, air trunk. And we're looking at previously, perhaps if you remember BioXcel, they started off with waste to energy. Yeah, it's just that they're probably, the business model was not strong enough where they couldn't, get a lot of other off-takers from other companies. But then the technology is there. It's just the business model needs to work. Data center, perhaps if you look at the other area would be looking at eco-industrial parks or circular economy park and all that. The idea has been there. It's just that the business model that would include the whole ecosystem to be within a same. Then this will become an iconic example of how this participation of private sectors within the infrastructure industry. Now, what it needs to be there as well is the government policy supporting those initiatives. So yes, it will work, but it takes two to tango.
Firstly, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm fully on board with that concept. So for example, in Ibrahim Technopolis, there are a lot of things that we want to put in place, which might not be the way we do things today, right? But if we were to do this on our own, probably then the projects will be super expensive and nobody is going to come. So there needs to be some sort of a collaboration or support coming from the government, be it state or federal, and we need to figure out what is that business model.
Right.
To make it work, to future-proof it, implement new things, and differentiate Johor and our development from other regional developments, right? Because we want to be that leader. In the industry. And it's not just for us, right? It's for the state, for the country. So the benefit will be spilled over throughout the ecosystem for everybody to enjoy, right? So the onus or responsibility cannot just fall on private sector or commercial developer on their own. There needs to be a strong collaboration and monetary contributions from interested parties.
So perhaps a more like a hybrid model where there's core infra pre-built by the government agencies and then the developers coming in to add on to it, right? Yeah. So Dato, in that sense, like, will this make Malaysia, if we were to adopt a more like a hybrid model, like in the context of a regional competitiveness, would that make us as SEZ more attractive versus Vietnam or Indonesia or UAE, for example?
I come back to my earlier point, right? Fundamentally, I do believe, and I believe this for a long time, that Johor in and of itself is an attractive investment destination. I come back to the points that we are at the center of trade flows. We're the center of one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. We have a lot of land. We have the rule of law. We have access to talent if we wanted to for a certain price. This logistic network is amazing. And when we look at the conflict zones of the world today, ASEAN remains still a very attractive area. Malaysia in particular, we are neither particularly in anybody's camp per se, so that neutrality also offers a lot from a geo-economic standpoint, advantage-wise. So when we stand back and look at that, that's the proposition to the world. And I come back to the point I also made earlier. I think sometimes we always chase investments for the sake of investments, so chasing a number. But the reality is, when we look at the semiconductor industry, for example, we started way back by Tun Lim Chong Yu, the late Tim Long, and his cohorts. It was about having a 30-year vision of the world. It was a 50-year vision of the world to build, allow the ecosystems to flourish, and getting the right partners in. So similarly with Johor, I think there's an opportunity for us to ensure we get the right partners in, the right investors in that have a long-term view. Singapore is a master of that, for example. They have the right investors who come in, who state the course, and who really develop and transfer technology. I think that's what we want for Johor ultimately, because it will really memperkasakan rakyat Johor, memperkasakan Johor as a whole, and ultimately Malaysia, to my mind lah. So when you come back to that, the question of infrastructure built as they come, I think is the right approach given our constraint and given that we're taking a longer term view of life. And I think in terms of structure, the private sector versus government, I think it's about the allocation of risk and the allocation of resource. Government's greatest skill or greatest sort of advantage or power is coordination. Is setting the rules to make sure everybody plays in the right way. Planning, for example. In Malaysia, I think we sometimes forget that. So it's either black or white. So we say privatize everything. And we look at KL's LRT system, for example, where we had 3 systems, none of them connected. And it was a bit funny, unfortunately. But the government, to my mind, should have played a role where they planned it properly, integrated, and made sure the parcels and packaging, as we've done with the MRT today, right, to some extent. So similarly with Johor, I think the government has a role in focusing on planning what IRDA has done, what the state government has done with some help from the federal element, to create the conditions, to set the planning, to set the right frameworks for people to operate. And then after that, as I was in Kazana, what we always like to do is have this OPP, other people's OPM, other people's money. Always use other people's money, don't use your own money. So similarly with government, we're short, that's a reality, right? So where we can, I think we should get private sector to take it on, build it into their business case, so we get the right guys with the right long-term views of life to come in, but we give them that regulatory certainty. So when they come in, they know we're not going to change the goalposts. I think that's how we get it right, to my mind.
We have a question here. Sorry, Fazli, it's not from me, right? As a real estate developer, you have the influence to shape Johor's economy. What is Johor's sector niche that can put a mark on the world map? Again, it's not from me.
Sector niche. Huh? Sector niche. I think I touched on this a little bit, right? We've got a huge data center campus in Sedenak, in Ibrahim Technopolis. That's something that should be the platform that we built upon. Probably some AI economy related stuff. We discussed this in detail, but nobody knows what that is yet today. I mean, we can talk about advanced manufacturing, med tech, food tech, and all the other techs, right? But you know, these are all just buzzwords at the end of the day. And it's not to say that we are the first. Other industrial parks are also looking at it. But is there any other industrial parks with, say, 1,400 acres of data centers? So that's where we need to build on, and I feel that it would revolve around AI-driven, smart, circular, digital economy.
Okay.
There's a lot of buzzwords being thrown in together.
Right, just as a closing remark, I think we're coming to the end of our time here. In one sentence for each one of you, right? In one sentence, what's the single most important enabler to make the build as they invest model work for the SEZ in the next 3 years? Fazil?
We'll start from how to make build. Like I said, it cannot be for a developer. It cannot be built as they invest, 100%, right? There needs to be a right balance. So in our case, it will be going build as they invest only for perhaps a greenfield, but even then, there needs to be a good understanding of the demands within at least a 6 to 12 months window, and we should build for that. Yeah, we shouldn't overbuild. Of course, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from past experiences where overbuilding leads to overhang and increased capital costs. But yeah, I think a good understanding of keeping your, pulse, having a pulse check, keeping your ear to the ground, a good understanding of where demands are coming in, so that you don't build speculatively, but you are not sitting and waiting either, yeah? Because once you realize, oh, I have to build, because something is coming, that means you're too late. So in our case, we can't afford that.
So perhaps a hybrid model where you are allowed to have some independence to build infra, but certain core infra is built by the government.
Yep.
Dato', what's the biggest single enabler that you would like to see?
So before I get to that, I just want to acknowledge Dato' Syed and Dr. Bhatt. I think whatever we see today, to a certain extent, I think these two guys have been critical to where we are today. We stand on the work that they've done through IIB, IRDA, and today from what we had with Iskandar. So I'm very sort of grateful to be here in the presence of both of you. Thank you. Coming back to the point, I'm going to steal Mr. Cheong's sort of point earlier. So he has 3 C's, I only have 2 C's. It's clarity and certainty. So clarity of roles. So the clarity of government as to what it's doing and what it should be doing, and focusing on regulatory certainty. For the private sector, it is about clarity that, we're here for the long term, we're here to do the right thing in terms of putting up the right business cases, not necessarily driven by upper incentive shopping or regulatory shopping, but really creating ecosystems and driving our investment plans with certainty. So clarity and certainty. Thank you.
Adding on to Dato' Omar's point there, I believe collective responsibility is another key point, because when we talk about Iskandar Malaysia over the last 18, 16 months, there are a lot of naysayers that Iskandar Malaysia has been the property, real estate play and all that. Yeah. So this is probably through the lack of understanding of the directions and also the gaps in implementation and all that. So collective responsibility moving forward actually with between state and federal, as well as inclusiveness, where because of the Johor-Singapore. So getting Singapore factor in, from the business perspective. So moving forward, this collective responsibility will need to be there to look into the hard part. We talk about sandboxing, we talk about embracing failure and all that. So if we are not there to actually accept failure as part of the equation, then this nobody is gonna be brave enough to actually push the boundary. So thank you.
I'm afraid that's all we have the time for today. Thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you to the audience for putting up with us. just before lunch. So thank you very much.
A quick one, please take a moment to complete our short